Let's start with Crime and Policing Minister Kit Malthouse. Good morning, Minister.
Morning, Trevor.
The Prime Minister's been in Kyiv talking to Mr Zelensky and about providing more weapons. What has he promised, and when can the Ukrainians expect delivery?
Well, obviously, we're funneling as much assistance as we possibly can, both financial and military, into Ukraine as quickly as we possibly can. Yesterday, obviously, there were promises of more equipment, 120 armed vehicles, anti-ship missiles, and that was on top of another 100 million of general equipment. But it's worth bearing in mind, we've also taken measures to assist economically, lifting tariffs on most imports coming in from Ukraine, and also adding another $500 million of loan guarantee through the World Bank to assist Ukraine in its economic welfare as much as possible. And that, of course, is on top of us being one of the biggest bilateral humanitarian donors into the area. We're pulling out all the stops to try and help Ukraine as much as we possibly can. The Prime Minister being there on the street, quite a remarkable moment, actually, that walkabout. Even for me, who's followed the career of the Prime Minister over many years, as you know, I think symbolised the support and the leadership that we're trying to show across the world as we, seek a victory for Ukraine.
We'll come to the issues of sanctions and so forth in a moment, but let's just stick with the military situation, if you wouldn't mind. This morning, we're reading about what look like war crimes by the Russians. What does the latest intelligence tell us about what's happening on the ground, please?
Well, obviously, it's a fast-moving and difficult situation in which the kind of fog of war makes the situation sometimes unclear. As far as we can see, obviously, Ukraine is resisting strongly. The Russians are falling back in particular areas, but it did feel yesterday, coming through, certainly on some of the publicly available information, as if Russian forces were massing for an assault in the east of the country. We're watching very carefully and doing what we can to reinforce the Ukrainian military as much as possible to resist any further attempts by Russia to take their country and to push them back where they possibly can.
So the advice that you're getting, or the intelligence you're getting, forgive me, is essentially that if there is, if you like, a retreat by the Russians, it's in order to regroup and to mount an assault on the east of the country, Donbass and Luhansk, for example.
Well, Trevor, I obviously don't want to, on screen here today, give a sense of what we think may be happening, and therefore may be second-guessed by the Russians. As I say, it's a horrible situation. The Ukrainians are fighting bravely, as the Prime Minister said, like lions. We're doing what we can to reinforce them and give them as much weaponry as they possibly can, including anti-ship missiles now, to defend themselves, and if possible, move the Russians off their territory. This is turning into a much longer conflict than I think the Russians calculated for, and much of that is down to the fortitude and the courage of the Ukrainians, assisted, we hope, by the Western munitions that have been pouring into that country, defensive munitions, allowing them to defend their turf.
But of course, I understand your point about not wanting to reveal the West's military hand. But one of the things that we are becoming pretty clearly aware of is that there are war crimes being committed here and allegedly by Russian forces. What exactly are we doing to guarantee that those people are brought to justice at some point?
Well, obviously, that's a matter for the International Criminal Court. And as you will know, the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, has been over to The Hague, I think, to talk to the International Criminal Court about what support we can give them in the pursuit of those who've perpetrated what are quite obviously war crimes during this dreadful conflict. The gathering of evidence during the conflict obviously needs to be done as assiduously as it possibly can, given that it's a conflict zone. And then following any outcome from the conflict, there obviously needs to be pursuit of those individuals. Now, while that is ongoing, obviously we can take action domestically around sanctions that we're able to put on individuals, including combatants, leading generals and others that are involved in it, to signal our, if you like, recognition of their part in this dreadful, dreadful assault upon a free democratic country. But making sure that the ICC is in a good position to deal with this as soon as they possibly can is where we need to be.
We understand that the Metropolitan Police's War Crimes Unit is involved here. Now, you were yourself responsible for the Metropolitan Police for a while when you were at City Hall in London. Can you tell us what they're actually up to there?
Well, Trevor, I can't, I'm afraid, but they are naturally engaged in gathering as much evidence as they can to offer assistance in the future if they possibly can. I mean, that's an operational matter for the police. They are operationally independent of me and indeed of the government generally. But you can guarantee, Trevor, that as we are putting as much support into the conflict as we possibly can to support the Ukrainians in their fight, we will do the same to bring those to justice who perpetrated some truly awful crimes during this dreadful time.
You have talked about the sanctions we've imposed against Mr. Putin's oligarch friends. We have stopped imports. We've thrown some Russian banks, out of the international banking messaging system, SWIFT. To be honest, though, it doesn't seem to have deterred him at all, does it?
Well, we shall see, Trevor. As you know, these sanctions take time.
His troops are still there.
Yeah, his troops are still there. You are quite right. But as we seek to tighten the sanctions net, as we seek to coordinate with our international partners, particularly in Europe, to restrict the flow of money, if you like, into Russia, particularly from their gas and oil, then that ratchet, if you like, starts to bite much more. Often sanctions take a little bit of time to feed through the financial system, but where we can find gaps, if you like, in our armory of sanctions, we are closing them as quickly as we can. As you know, we legislated very quickly to give ourselves the agility to move, to try and shut down as much of the Russian economy as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do that in the days and weeks to come. You know, these sanctions, I think, will start to bite, if they're not biting already, very significantly in Russia, and we hope that that will give Mr. Putin cause to reflect.
Well, I understand the point you're making, that we're trying to essentially put a squeeze on the Russian population by preventing imports and so on. But the truth of the matter is that Mr. Putin's demonstrated he doesn't care that much if his own people suffer. And as long as the Germans continue to buy his gas, as long as the Chinese continue to trade in consumer goods, and as long as India continues to buy oil and weapons from Russia, he's not that bothered. Shouldn't we be focusing more frankly on our friends than on some of the things that we're doing?
Look, we're in constant conversation, Trevor, with all our allies across the world about what more we can do to build a really solid barricade, if you like, against Russian economic activity across the world. Just to say, we have no dispute with the Russian people. This is a dispute with the Russian government led by Mr. Putin, who have ordered this dreadful assault. That's why we've taken measures against his known associates, whether they be oligarchs or others, why we've taken measures against members of the government who strangely have a diaspora across the world.
Forgive me for interrupting you, but I was really asking about our friends here, and we've heard actually from other members of NATO, Poles, for example, and the Ukrainians themselves, that they're pretty disappointed with what the Germans are not doing. Do you think any of our supposed allies and possible friends are effectively letting down this effort and putting a hole in the barricades you just mentioned?
Well, Trevor, look, as I said, we're constantly talking to our friends in Germany and in France and elsewhere in Europe. And in fact, the President of the European Commission, as you know, visited Kyiv not very long ago to express her support. And the European Union has taken significant measures. Having said that, we do need to bear in mind that, certain parts of Europe are very dependent on Russian gas. They are taking steps now to wean themselves off. The Germans in particular are looking at what more they can do to bolster their own defense. And of course, Nord Stream 2, that pipeline, which was due to come on stream, has been shut down or cancelled. We are pushing as much as we possibly can for as strong a set of sanctions from the EU and the wider world as we possibly can get. We recognize that this is a ratchet we need to turn as tightly as we possibly can in the cause of freedom in Ukraine. And we will support the Ukrainian president as he repeats those calls across the world.
All right, before we come back to domestic politics, which I do want to talk to you about, do you feel a bit ashamed that our neighbours, the Irish, reckon that they will welcome as many as 40,000 Ukrainian refugees by the end of this month, while we have managed to admit 12,000 of the 70 or 80,000 who would like to come here?
Well, Trevor, you're right. We've had about just shy of 80,000 applications for visas. Of those, we've issued just over 40,000. And of that 40,000, you're right, 12,000 have come to the UK. Now, though the difference between the 40,000 and the 12 might be for a variety of reasons. We know that for a lot,
it's three times for a country which has a population a fraction of ours. Come on.
Yeah, no, I completely understand, and I know that people are disappointed with the progress of the visa regime. The Home Secretary was out this week expressing her frustration and regret that it hasn't been quicker, but we are motoring now. Now, it's worth saying that while we issue visas to those individuals, there are a lot of people who are in region in Poland and other countries who are in receipt of UK visas, but thinking about their options, preying upon hope that they can return to their country, but in possession of the ability to come to the UK for safe haven if they wish. Now, we are processing as fast as we can. We've now got hundreds of people from across Whitehall working on this. I think we did 1,000 yesterday. We will accelerate during the week, and we hope to get through them as fast as we possibly can.
All right. Well, no doubt my colleagues next time on this programme will check up on that. Let's come back to the cost of living here. You didn't back off on the national insurance rise. Don't need to explain that again. You published an energy strategy this week with a lot of promises about wind power and all the rest of it for the medium term. But I wonder if you could explain what any of that is going to do for families who are going to be faced with a big rise in the autumn when the cap rises, in the context of which, let's remember, a quarter of British families have no savings. A third have less than £100 available to them at any one time. How are those people going to meet that demand for a rise in the cost of energy?
So, Trevor, look, we obviously we recognise that the rise in the cost of living and indeed fuel in particular is very tough. Some of that comes from the choices that we've made about supporting Ukraine, some of it from a post-pandemic kind of boom, if you like, or difficulty in supply. We're doing what we can to try and assist in that awful equation for so many people by targeting as much assistance as we can, particularly those who are on a lower income or low paid. So whether that's the warm home discount going to 3 million people, the £9 billion energy rebate scheme that we put in place, there's lots of support going in there. And in particular, worth noting that we doubled the household support fund now to £1 billion targeted at those who will be really struggling and can go to their local authority for assistance. It's worth it saying, just on your first question, though, Trevor. I did let you talk.
I did let you to advance Ukraine as an example, but honestly, you put up the national insurance. You have not uprated benefits by more than 3.1%, I think it is now, against an inflation rate now at about 7.7%. These are choices you are making.
You are quite right. These are choices that we're making and we have to own. So we took a decision that the backlog in the NHS required an investment of £39 billion, and that's what that national insurance rise will raise. But remember, Trevor, that the Chancellor then took the step of raising the threshold, which will come into effect later this year, meaning that 30-odd million people will pay less national insurance as a result. Don't forget also, there is if you like, a suite of tools that will assist people who are low paid. So the national living wage rose, I think, last Friday by 6.6%. We've also increased the taper on universal credit, meaning that those in work and in receipt of universal credit will be better off by £1,000 a year. So when you look at the overall package, we are stretching the financial envelope as much as we possibly can to try and do two things. First of all, to invest in those public services, particularly the National Health Service, but secondly, assist those people who are really struggling with the cost of living as much as we can. Now, these are difficult choices against the backdrop of a balance sheet with a lot of borrowing on it coming out of the pandemic. And I understand that it will be very, very tough for lots of people.
All right, let's talk about your principal decision maker on these questions, the Chancellor. I wonder if he's listening to the many people in this country who are furious that at the revelation that he's raising taxes while his wife made a choice to pay tax not to the country that her husband's asked to make these sacrifices, not to the country that put a roof over her head, but to India. Now, I know it's legal and all that. You don't need to explain that to me. But politically, just a terrible mistake. Massive tin ear here.
Well, first of all, it's worth pointing out that, as Ms Murthy said, she paid UK tax on all her UK income. But you will have seen her statement. She accepted that there was a sense of disquiet about the situation, and she's moved to correct it. Now, she is a non-combatant in the political fray, but I think both she and Rishi have recognised that situation was not one that was favourable, and it was distracting from the overall message. He's put a huge amount of effort, time, commitment and energy into helping this country get through the last couple of years. And it's unfortunate that his wife has been drawn into this political fray in this way. They've now corrected that situation. Hopefully we can move on. Well,
we can't quite move on because it's not just her, it's him. We now discover, courtesy of my colleague here, Sam Coates, that for the first 18 months as Chancellor, he held a green card, which you will know means legal permanent resident of the United States. Essentially, you know this also, that that means the United States expects him to pay taxes on whatever he earned in the whole world to them first. Now, not good, is it? I mean, this is really, in a time when we want the whole country to trust government and support what it's trying to do, it's not a good look, is it?
Well, look, Rishi Sunak was obviously somebody who
it's
worked
careless,
hard,
at least.
Got himself a place overseas at Stanford, got a job there, and required a green card as a result.
But that's years ago.
Yeah, but my understanding was, Trevor, that this was a hangover from that time, and that very often people with green cards who don't go to the United States and don't take advantage of it, it just lapses and gets removed. Now, he obviously...
Yeah, but he's not... Come on, Minister, he's not just anybody. He is the Chancellor of the United Kingdom.
I understand, but I don't understand the intricacies of the green card system. But as far as I could see, and as far as I understand, it actually added more complexity and more onerous obligations to him, not less. And it certainly didn't impact on his tax position in the UK, where he was paying tax. But look, it may be worth you in the future getting him on to talk about that stuff. As far as I could see, he took advice from the American officials. He handed his green card back when he was there and regularised that position as well.
Politically, he's toast, isn't he?
No, I don't believe he is. Rishi Sunak has been a remarkable force for good in this country over the last 2 years. He put in place some incredible support schemes during the pandemic at enormous speed. He managed to produce a budget within just weeks of becoming Chancellor. He is a smart, clever, committed politician who came into Parliament with me, and I've been deeply impressed by him ever since.
OK, Mr Malthouse, I'm sure that Mr Sunak will be glad to hear your reply as he consumes his own toast rather than being it. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm a big fan. Thanks, Trevor.